Do you want to start off with who you are, what the position you have is, and why that means that you'll be helping us go over the rules?
why I actually know what I'm
Why
doing,
why are you here,
allegedly.
Paddy?
So, everyone who watches this should already know who I am. My name's Thomas Horner. I generally go by Paddy, so anyone that's heard me call Paddy and not Thomas before might be confused. I am a level 6 linesman with the English Ice Hockey Association, and also in training to be a linesman for the Elite Ice Hockey League in the UK. I've been officiating since late 2018, which means I've only been at it 3 years. However, in that time, I've done quite a few higher level games, so like National League conference finals and stuff, and now worked a few Elite League games.
Cool. I realize I gave you
Um,
too big of an opportunity to flex there.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I don't often get a chance to flex because officials are generally just hated. So thanks, Rob. It's
no worries.
appreciated.
Cool. So in that case, do you want to clarify what the roles and duties that officials have in ice hockey are, and what players need to know about the differences between those?
So you've got two types of officials on the ice. Sometimes you've only got one, and it depends what system they're running. So generally, uni games, you will see them run a two-man system. What that means is you will have two officials on the ice. They might have orange or red armbands on, they might not, but they're both responsible for the same thing. So they're both responsible for making line calls, which are offside and icing, which we'll talk about later. And they are also responsible for declaring goals and calling penalties, stopping and starting play, and taking face-offs, which I think is everything. At higher level uni games and varsity games, you will quite often see a three-man system. So that'll be two linesmen, which won't have armbands on, and then there'll be a referee who is in charge of the game, and he'll have either orange or red armbands. The linesmen are responsible for, or linesperson, if you want to be politically correct. They're responsible for line calls, so offsides and icings. There are a few other things they can call, so they can call or blow the player down for hand pass, high stick, too many men, premature substitution of the goaltender, injured player, and I think we can now blow down for a penalty for a high stick, an injury called with a high stick. Referees are responsible for declaring goals and assessing penalties. That's their primary duty. You will, at the very highest level of hockey in the UK, you'll also see a four-man system. So that is two linesmen, two linespersons, and two referees. And again, like the three-man system, the linespersons are responsible for line calls, and the referees are responsible for penalties, declaring goals, etc.
Cool. So for university hockey, if you have a two-person system, should you be treating them from the perspective of a player as equal? There's not one who you would go and complain about a penalty to rather than the other.
Yeah, so in terms of communicating with officials, I'll cover that in just a second. But if it's a two-person system or a four-person system, in the two-person system, both referees are completely equal. There's not one in charge. So you can go to either for whatever discussion you want to have with them. And on the four-person system, again, both referees they have the same duty. So they have the same power, the same authority. In terms of communicating with officials, that segues quite nicely. Thanks, Rob. It's so one of the things I always tell players I play with is a referee will not change their mind. Even if they're wrong, even if they know they're wrong, they will not change their mind. And the reason for that is they have to make a snap decision in the moment. And the reason they have to do that is because if they don't make it quickly, it can lead to more upset when you do blow the player down, or it can lead to dangerous situations. Because they have to make a snap decision, sometimes they will get it wrong. But even if they've got it wrong and they know they've got it wrong, they cannot change that decision because the moment they do, they've almost lost respect in the game. So there is 0 point in complaining about a call. Now, that's not to say you can't go and talk to officials. And one of the best things you can do is go up to the official if you're wanting to maybe highlight that the way he's interpreted things isn't what happened. You can go up and you can ask them, what did you see? Give them a chance to say why they're making the call they are. And then you've opened that dialogue and you've got the opportunity to say, okay, this is what I saw happen, or this is what I thought happened. Again, it's not going to change the call, but at least you've got your point of view across. And because you're communicating openly, at some point in the future, you might catch a bit of a nicer break with that official. In all honesty, you can actually be a menace on the ice, and still be respectful to the officials. You can go out there and you can make all the plays you want that I want to give you penalties for, but you can still be nice and respectful towards the officials. You will also, what you might find, especially as new players to the game, some officials will turn around and they'll say, I only want to talk to a letter. Or they will say, right now, I only need a captain or an assistant or an alternate. The way the rules are written is it should only be a captain or alternate that goes to talk to the officials. Now, most officials are fine talking to anyone as long as it's a respectful conversation. But at some events, when they're having a discussion with each other, they just want a captain or an alternate there. And it only needs to be one. They don't need to be surrounded by 4 or 5 players. So there are moments where they'll probably say, I only want a captain. Go and talk to them later after the event's passed. They're not riled up, or as you're going off for a period break. Pick your moments if you're not a letter, is basically what I'm trying to say.
Noted. So if there is a penalty that's then being assessed, it's acceptable for somebody who is a letter, particularly a captain, to then, as you mentioned earlier, ask the ref what they saw, what the call is, and get clarification on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Beyond that, some of the fundamentals of rules that are likely, especially at low-level uni, which is where I'm asking from, to be called. Can you clarify how an offside works, when in an offside there is a stoppage in play, and where in an offside there is some kind of negative impact on a team?
So the offside rule in hockey works very similar to football. The only difference is that line that you can't pass before the puck is a physical blue line painted on the ice. So whereas it's an imaginary line drawn by the last defender in football, the difference here is it's just a physical line. An offside play is a play where a person enters the attacking zone by crossing the blue line before the puck has completely crossed the line. The edge that makes a difference, what's called the determining edge, because the line's quite thick, it's probably about a foot thick, is the edge inside the zone. So what I mean by that is the line itself is physically part of whatever zone the puck is in. So the puck must be fully carried over the line before you fully cross the line. What you will find is if you carry the puck over the line while you've got a player offside, it's an immediate whistle. That whistle's to stop play, and a face-off will be taken just outside of the zone. Or if you travel into the zone in an offside position and the puck is then shot into the zone by your team, the referee or linesman will put their hand up and they will either shout off or out. That is a delayed offside, and that is your opportunity to get out of the zone and negate that offside. So that's your opportunity to realize I'm in an offside position. I need to get out the zone. And all 5 players must be outside the zone at the same time before you can go back in.
So if you enter the zone offside and then you start getting called for an offside, and you either refuse to or are unaware and don't act on the referee's instruction to leave the zone, and then you play the puck, what happens then?
So you will be given a little bit of dispensation, and for a low-level uni game and a low-level hockey game, you get more dispensation than you do at the top end. If you play the puck either with your feet, your stick, your body, or you put pressure on the defending puck carrier, i.e. you influence play, the player will then be blown down and it'll be an offside. Generally speaking, it should be in what's called an intentional offside. And instead of taking the face-off just outside the zone at the offside face-off dots in the neutral, it will go right the way back to in front of your goaltender. And you will probably get screamed at by your coach, especially if you turn over a goal there.
So it's generally a good idea when you're crossing the blue line, if you then start to hear the ref or lines person shouting, trying to keep an ear out, because it could be that they are informing you that you are offside and that your team will be at detriment if you don't then adhere to that.
Exactly. Essentially, if people start screaming and going mental, there's one of two reasons for it. You're either doing something really good and you're being encouraged to do more of it, or you're doing something really bad and you need to freaking stop. In the case of if you've just skated into the zone and everyone goes mental and starts shouting, I would start listening for what word they're shouting, because chances are it's offside.
Cool. Is there any time in play, if you're at a man up or a man down, or any kind of penalties that mean that an offside is not called?
So there's no rule where an offside is not offside, essentially. So I know what you're getting at, and we'll talk about that a little bit further with icing. The essential answer is no. An offside is an offside right the way through the game.
Is any skater able to cause an offside?
Yes.
Okay. Can we move on to icings then? Which is a sort of an adjacent rule, but also one that I know that a lot of our guys aren't always confident with.
Yeah, so icing's the other one of those rules where you will see most of the face-offs caused by. So the way the icing rule works is if the puck is shot from behind the center line down the ice and crosses the goal line, not between the goalposts, i.e. it's not a goal, it's not a shot on net. If it's shot from behind the center red line and crosses the goal line, and the first player to reach that puck would be a defending player, that is an icing situation. What the icing rule is designed for is it's designed to stop you taking possession of the puck in your end and firing it down the ice as hard as you can so that you can get a change. There's a couple of times when an icing wouldn't be an icing. So, for example, if it's a shot on goal and it hits the goaltender or the goaltender is forced to make a save, that's not an icing. And if the goaltender comes out of his crease or makes a motion toward the puck, that is also not an icing. And that doesn't matter if it was going on net or not. If he makes a move towards the puck or he comes out of his crease, that negates the icing. The only other time you would not have an icing when you would expect one is if an attacking player would be the first person there, or if the team who shot it is short-handed, i.e. they've got less players than the other team, by way of a penalty. So if you're down a man because you have somebody sat in the penalty box, you can ice the puck to your heart's content. The only situation to be aware of where I've had a team go mental at me because they didn't understand the rule is if you are short a player because they've pulled their goaltender, i.e. they've got 6 skaters and you've got 5, icing is still in effect.
Cool. So it's only when there's a penalty infraction that's resulted in you being down a man.
Correct.
Let's go over a couple of those penalties then that could have caused that. The first one, which I know we're going to get plenty of at uni, is the too many men call. I know that there's some changes with regards to where a player can be and can't be, and when it's going to get called. Can you talk a little about the exacts of the rule, and then also generally how you'd expect it to be called at uni hockey level?
Essentially, the way too many men works is during a normal game of hockey, you're allowed 6 pairs of skates on the ice. That is normally 1 pair for your goaltender and 5 pairs of outskaters. When you have a line change, so when you're changing for someone coming off the ice, you're allowed onto the ice when the player you're replacing is within a certain distance of the bench. So that distance that you're allowed to change when the player you're replacing is within is 1.5 meters. So that's 5 foot of the player's bench. If the person you're replacing is within 5 foot of the bench, you're allowed to step out on the ice. However, you're not allowed to influence play until the player you're replacing has left the ice surface. So the worst thing that can happen is you step off the bench, the person you're replacing is still stood on the ice, and you catch a pass or play the puck. Some things that everyone thinks are too many men and are not is if you're skating for your change and you're just about to step off the ice and the puck gets rimmed around and hits you in the skates, that's not too many men. And every uni player screams blind that that's too many men. It is not, because you've not intentionally affected or influenced play.
So it wouldn't be of benefit if you see a player going for a slow line change to just fire the puck at them, because that won't get called, or it isn't, according to the rule book, a too many men call.
Exactly. And you do see it quite a lot, especially during first and second periods, that the attacking team will try and like rim it round so it hits the D-man's skates or something like that as he's coming off. It's not a too many men call.
The too many men call, also, it doesn't matter if it's even strength. So if you're 5-on-5 with skaters, even if you're on a penalty or if the other team has a penalty, you can still get called for it, right?
Correct, yeah. So it's too many players, so it doesn't really matter how many you are allowed to have at the time. If you're allowed to have 4 because you've got one in the penalty box, and you've got 5, you've still got too many players.
With the too many men call, is that always a penalty, and who receives the penalty?
So it is always a penalty. There is a very, very unique situation about pulling the netminder, but that's premature substitution of the goaltender, and I would be amazed if it ever happened in Uni C level. It is always a penalty, and the penalty has to be served by, it used to be any player on the ice at the time of the penalty. It's now just any player.
If you are playing the puck, and I know this is one that it might be the rules slightly different depending on where you are. What are the rules with when you can play the puck, not just with your stick?
So that's a really good question, and one that a lot of people don't actually grasp until they've been playing hockey for a little while. You can play the puck with pretty much most of your body parts. So you can play it with your feet, you can play it with your skates, you can play it with essentially any body part you can play it with. The only one you need to be careful with is hands. So you can play the puck with your hands in certain circumstances. It's not like football. Specifically, there is a rule known as hand pass, and that is if you glove or bat a puck to a teammate, that is a whistle, and you will lose ground on a face-off for hand pass. The only time that's not true is if it's in your end. So if you're in your defensive zone, so that is your defensive third of the ice, not your half. If you're in your defensive zone, you are allowed to make a hand pass to another one of your players, as long as that hand pass is started and completed in the defensive zone.
So it would not be allowed for you to make a hand pass to somebody who is on your half of the ice, but outside of that blue line to designate your defensive zone.
Yeah, exactly. You can only do it within your third of the ice, not your half, unfortunately. Be really
And
nice if you could.
what's the is there a penalty assessed for a hand pass?
No, hand pass is just a stoppage in play, and you lose ground on the face-off.
Back to hand passes, you said that it's a case of you just lose ground on it. Is that losing ground the same no matter where on the ice the hand pass is done? So whether it's in the attacking zone, whether it's in the neutral zone, etc.
Yeah, basically it goes back to the furthest dot. Essentially, it's so that the offending team does not gain any territorial advantage. So, for example, if a hand pass is played from the center circle into the attacking zone, it will come back to the offside dot just outside the offending team zone. You basically lose ground to the next dot back.
And if you were to to make a hand pass, you slap at the puck and it goes up the ice. But then a player on the opposing team touches the puck, play just resumes, right?
Yeah, so it would have to be slightly more than touches the puck. They would have to gain possession, and that has to do with being firmly in control. But essentially, yes, if it goes to the opposite team, that's fine. That negates the hand pass, just the same way it does with a high. It negates a high stick.
Next one is with goalies, where you mentioned about sort of substitutions and such. What's the rule with regards to the goalie, where they are eligible to be, and who else is eligible to be in those places?
So what we're talking about there is goal crease. There is a blue semicircle painted on the ice, which is it's the goaltender's crease. It's kind of their territory, if you like. There are specific rules pertaining to what you can do around the goal crease, but essentially it consists of you can't go and stand in that crease. So you can't post up as an attacking player in the goalie's crease. What you'll normally hear is whichever official is in the zone with you, and at that point they should be stood on the goal line just alongside the boards. They will normally start shouting at you to either get out of the blue, so out the blue or out the paint. You'll get 3 to 5 shouts of out the blue, out the paint, and then you'll get a whistle and the face-off will be taken outside of the zone.
Beyond that, if a player does make contact with the goalie, how is that handled, and does it depend on whether it's within that paint or crease or outside of it?
Yeah, so the rule book explicitly states that goaltenders are not fair game for the same kind of body contact that another player is. When they are within their crease, they must be allowed to play their position. So what I mean by that is you can't encroach or contact the goaltender in a way that they can't then save the puck. So you can't push or shove them the way you would a battle for body position with like a defensive player, a D-man. As an attacking player, if you're skating in, you can't. It's known as running the netminder. So you can't run the netminder just to try and put the puck in the net. You can't shove the netminder over the goal line to get the puck in the net. Not only is it against the rules, teams will defend their goaltender, especially at high levels, and they will defend their goaltender quite aggressively. So you're putting yourself at risk by trying to run the goaltender. For all, some elite league teams allegedly like to do it. In terms of contact outside of the crease, if a goalie comes out to play the puck just because they're outside of the crease, still doesn't mean they're fair game. So you can't check them, you can't hit them. You'll normally end up with a penalty for either goaltender interference or charging. But incidental contact, and incidental contact we'll talk more about later on, is permitted. So if you're trying to squeeze by them on the boards, you're allowed to, brush elbows with them. You're allowed to make contact with them. You just can't check them.
Further to that, if a goaltender is not eligible to be impacted by contact the same way as a skater is, what are the rules with regards to if a goaltender commits that contact?
So goaltenders are still subject to the same rules that other players are. So, for example, they're still subject to the rules for tripping. They're still subject to the rules for, I'm going to say boarding, which is, I think, what you're getting at, if I'm thinking about the video that happened in the Elite League recently. So they are still able to take penalties such as that. So, for example, if a goaltender trips you over as you're coming around the net or something like that, they should get a tripping penalty. There is a slight difference in that they don't serve their own penalties. I believe for goaltender penalties, it needs to be a player from the ice. And these sorts of technicalities are probably the reason why I'm a linesman and not a referee. I believe for goaltender penalties, it needs to be somebody from the ice.
Beyond that, is there anything else you wanted to go on with contact for players with regards to what is expected and what is deemed to be safe, unsafe, and worthy of a penalty?
So, in terms of body contact, there are essentially two kinds of hockey in the UK. There is checking and non-checking. If you've ever been to watch a pro or semi-pro games, most of them are played under checking rules. What that means is you are permitted to make body contact, normally quite aggressive body contact, with another player in the intent of separating them from the puck. And that's quite an important distinction. Essentially, you're allowed to hit another player in a certain manner, in a safe manner, to get possession of them. In non-checking hockey, which is the majority of rec hockey, juniors below age group under 16, and the majority of university hockey, they play non-checking hockey. Now, non-checking hockey is not non-contact, so all that really changes is you're not allowed to go out there and hit someone to get them off the puck. What you can do is you can still initiate body contact, and you can do that in a couple of different ways, one of which is battling for body position. Say if you're both skating in for a loose puck, you're allowed to get in front of them, jostle them, rub shoulders, push and shove in certain manners, so that you can be the first player there, or you can be the one to come out of the battle for with the puck. You can also, as a defenseman, when you're backing away, you can start to angle them towards the boards, and once they reach the boards, you can roll them on the boards so that the puck carries on going and they are held up. In making those kinds of contact, you need to be careful not to incur other penalties because of an illegal challenge for possession, which we'll cover in just a second. But essentially, the two differences are checking hockey, you're allowed to go out and hit, providing you're not hitting people in the head, you're not jumping, leaving your feet, etc. Non-checking hockey, you are still allowed to make body contact, but you can't hit someone just to get them off the puck.
So if you are playing non-checking league, then there is a penalty for body checking. Is that how it's assessed?
Yes. I'm not sure how the wording is in the new book, but the old book, it used to come under the rule illegal body check, and that's because the league or rule book you're playing under does not permit body checks. It falls under or on very similar tariffs to stuff like tripping and hooking, which are quite common calls. So, generally speaking, it'll be a minor penalty, which means you go and sit in the box for 2 minutes. If it is what's deemed reckless endangerment, i.e., by doing what you did, you put the player in danger, it's worthy of either a 5+ game misconduct, which means you're tossed from the game and your team will play without a player for 5 minutes, or in very extreme situations, it can be a match penalty, which normally means you will have a ban of some form coming your way from the league. That's a rarity.
I know that the BUIHA are quite keen on, if they are receiving match penalty reviews, they're always reviewed, and it is unlikely that you will avoid a suspension if you commit some infraction that results in a match penalty.
Exactly. Generally speaking, a match penalty always has a ban. There are rare circumstances where the league have downgraded penalties, but they are very rare.
So staying on penalties, we've got fair and unfair challenges for possession. Do you want to talk over that a little bit?
Yeah, so this essentially almost falls under sportsmanship. There are things you are allowed to do to take the puck off another player, and or to stop them gaining possession, and there are things that you're not allowed to do. So things that you're not allowed to do is the stuff that you would almost automatically know is cheating. So tripping is a big one. You can't pull a player's skates out from underneath him using your stick. You can't, if a player's skating, you can't stick your stick between their legs so that they fall over. Hooking is quite explanatory. It's using the blade of your stick around a body part, an arm, a leg, or around their midriff to pull a player. So you see that quite often when a player gets beaten, they'll try and hook the player back with their stick. That's not permitted. Slashing tends to be a funny one, and people struggle with the definition of slashing. A slash can be delivered to pretty much, well, to any body part, and a slash can be delivered to the stick. Where's legal challenges for possession using the stick, which look like slashing, are to go underneath a player's stick and lift it. A stick lift is completely fine. A stick press is also fine, so that's coming over the stick and pressing down to hold a player's stick on the ice. When you go in for a stick press, you need to be careful that you're not making a violent downward chopping motion, because that comes into the realms of slashing. You're allowed to stick check on players' blades, on the blade of their stick, sorry. Anything up near the hands will generally get a hooking or a slashing penalty. Other things or situations where you'll end up getting a penalty that you should probably be aware of. Quite a lot of low-level players take interference penalties. This is generally either interacting with or impeding another player such that they can't skate freely around the ice. So the one where you see this all the time is there's a loose puck, two players are skating in for the puck, and the player in front will slow down and try and get in the way of the other player to stop them gaining possession. That's an interference call, and it should be called most of the time because it's quite an easy interference call to make. I think that's the majority of it. Slashes, hooks, trips, interference. There is holding and holding the stick. They are both fairly self-explanatory. The only caveat I'll put on holding is if the puck is on the board, you can pin a player to the boards for a short duration so that you can try and dig the puck out. But once the puck's gone, you need to let them go.
Adjacent to that, but related to body contact and sort of what is fair and unfair, when attempting to maintain position. So, for example, if you're in front of the opposing team's goaltender and there's two people who are both looking to try and stand in the same space, and this is mostly from the position of non-checking uni hockey, what is acceptable to interact with somebody when you're trying to stand in the same spot, and what is not acceptable, and what will usually be called by a referee?
So you're allowed to jostle, push, and shove for body position in front of the goal crease, obviously being careful to stay out of the paint. What you can't do is you can't use your stick to punish another player. So two common tactics are to hold onto the stick with two hands and push the other player in the back. That is coming into the realms of cross-checking, which again is a penalty. The minimum tariff for that is 2 minutes, but you can quite easily get 5+ game and match penalty because it's quite a dangerous action. Another common one we see is to rest the stick on a player's back and push down over in the back of the shorts. Again, that'll get you a cross-checking penalty. That's not permitted. You can't use your feet to push another player's skates out. Kick the skates out, slew foot. That's a really dangerous penalty that will see you in the dressing room before you have chance to pass go and collect £200. Where a battle for body position enters the realms of penalties is where you have either a significant size difference or a significant skill difference and a player ends up on the floor. So if you push and shove a player to the extent that they fall over, the referee's starting to look at penalties and what's going on in front of the crease. You can put a player off and prevent them from either making a shot as a D-man or gaining possession as a forward. You can put them off and prevent them doing those things without having to take them to the floor.
Okay. Beyond that, I think that's most of the penalty stuff that we're going to see. With regards to the start and stop of play, what should a player do when there's a whistle blown, or when a buzzer goes, or when they've been told that like things have stopped? Where can they continue in motion? I think you know where I'm going with this. What is acceptable and what's not acceptable to do after the whistle?
So, technically speaking, once you hear either a buzzer or a whistle, you need to stop whatever you're doing. The important times to do that are just generally, all the time. But times to be aware of is if you're in possession and you are about to, say, make a shot on net or dump a puck. If you hear a whistle, you hear a buzzer, you need to stop. If you shoot a puck after a whistle, it's a really good way to get the other team annoyed.
Unwanted attention?
Yeah, let's go the diplomatic way of saying unwanted attention. I've seen a player shoot the puck after the whistle. Now, he was already wound up and in the action of shooting when the whistle went. I've seen a player shoot a puck after a whistle and get mullered by 3 of the other team from a point of view if they wanted to protect their netminder. So when you hear a whistle, you hear a buzzer, you need to stop.
Right. When play is stopped, not because of a whistle, but if a player knocks a puck and then it goes into the bench, or it goes out of play in some other way, what's the result of that?
So I don't expect you'll see it too often at lower levels, but generally speaking, the mantra "play to the whistle" holds true. So, for example, if a goalie's got hold of it, by all means play to that whistle. If it ends up in a bench or it goes over the glass or it hits the netting above the goals at either end of the rink, again, play to the whistle, play till the ref decides play stopped. But generally speaking, you will get a whistle from the official and it will go to a face-off. Face-off location depends on the reason for the whistle and what happened in the run-up to the whistle. But generally speaking, once you've heard that whistle, you want to be looking to your benches for what your coach wants to do. Generally, that's your opportunity to get a change rather than changing on the fly during play.
Great. One more is with regards to the locations that pucks are getting dropped for face-offs and such. You mentioned that there's the offside dots and then there's face-off dots that are inside each team's defending zones. Is it acceptable for you to ask the ref why they are placing the puck where they are, if you're, for example, a letter, or if you are the one expected to take a face-off?
Yeah, so there's 9 face-off dots on the ice, 2 in either end zone, 2 just outside the blue lines of those end zones, which are the offside dots, 1 right in the center. In terms of why an official is taking a face-off in a certain area, unless there's a strong reason you feel it should be somewhere else, I would be inclined to leave it unless you are very, very convinced that there is a reason it shouldn't be there. So what I mean by that is, generally speaking, it'll be obvious where a face-off should go. There are 1 or 2 obscure situations where it could go in a different place depending on how things happened. But I generally wouldn't say challenge it unless you're sure.
And as we led off with, the referee is unlikely to change their mind.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, I've done it, and I've had a face-off moved to the benefit of my team. I was right to have the face-off moved, and I took a screenshot of the rule later on and sent it to the official. However, that was on a tournament with unsanctioned officials. So it was a slightly different situation anyway, and I was acting as a team captain. But
okay.
unless you're very, very convinced and very, very sure, I would be inclined to almost let it go. Because, like you said, they're unlikely to change their mind.
Great. Okay. In that case, that's everything I wanted to cover. Have you got anything else you want to say?
No, I think that's the important stuff. That's the get started in hockey stuff. And that's the real critical stuff that people need to know. If you do have any questions, this is not just you, Rob, this is everyone. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to send me them, especially if they're really weird, obscure ones. Even if I don't know the answer and can't find it, I have at least one friend who is very much a rule book, so I can field it out to them. More than happy to do that, and it helps me learn the ins and outs of the book as well.
Great. Okay. Thanks for giving us your time. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll be sure to pass on any questions that I get through to you for that.
Sick. Sounds good to me, and I will see you tomorrow to work on some face-off stuff.